But coming into 2025, the Lord started stirring in my spirit about a question. I'm going to pull a Brother Peter on you guys. But he posed it in a different way that I'm going to ask you. But the gist of it was, I'll tell you what the question is. So it's, what is holding you back? What is holding you back? You know, our theme this year, or our mantra, is to thrive in 25. I want to thrive even past 25. Pastor challenged us to thrive before 25. But the Lord stirred in me about that question, and the gist of it was, when was I just going to let loose, go all in, and trust him? And you might look at me and think, she doesn't trust God? What? But I do. I have trust issues. I have big-time trust issues. Pastor will tell you that all the time. He is quick to point out my indiscretions and my faults, my things. Hopefully I can point out some of his, but he's pretty good, though. He's pretty perfect. I'll admit, he's got a lot. He can handle things a lot better than I can handle things. And I give him a lot to handle. So, but I admit I do have trust issues. A lot of it probably stems from a spirit of rejection. You know, I was adopted, given up for adoption, placed for adoption. I don't like that given up anymore, because a lot of times back in the 60s and 70s, they weren't given up. They were told you have to surrender them. But I was surrendered for adoption. And even though I grew up in a wonderful family, wonderful parents, they loved me. I knew they loved me. I never felt like I was weird or anything. I mean, you guys might think I am, but I never felt weird growing up. But you know, the spirit of rejection is real, and it can mess with you. It doesn't just come from those that were adopted, though. It can come from every area. You might have been bullied in elementary school, or pushed around, or I think bullied is kind of a word that's overused. But you might have been teased a lot and made to feel insecure about yourself. You might have had something that was an outward thing that people could see that caused you to feel insecure, and so you thought everybody was looking at you. Maybe acne, or a limp, or something like that. The things can come from hurtful things that have been said to you. I mean, I've had many hurtful things said to me or said behind my back that I found out later, or something. Could be from promises that weren't kept, that you trusted someone to keep a promise and they didn't keep that promise. Trust issues can come from prayers that weren't answered, that you thought should be answered. Not saying that they're not going to be, but sometimes that timeline of waiting for God makes us wonder if he's really listening, or if maybe we're not good enough to get an answer from God. It could be from miracles that weren't performed, that you wanted to see performed. We could be from somebody that you saw pass away, that you didn't believe should have passed away. There's so many things that cause us to have trust issues. And so when the Lord was talking to me about this, he says, when are you just going to let loose? When are you going to get all in and trust me, daughter? I'm your father. I'm the one that created you. I mean, Psalm 139 is I believe that he wrote it just for me. You guys can think he wrote it for you, but I believe he wrote it for me, that I was fearfully and wonderfully made. That he saw me when I was being formed in my mother's womb. He knew every single thing about it. He knit me together in there. And so, this father is telling me these things. Why aren't you trusting in me? But I guarantee you might say, well, I don't have trust issues. But I guarantee you, every single person in this room has been affected in some way or another, and maybe, other people that you know too, with things that cause you to hold back. Things like pain from something that somebody did for you, or pain in your body, even sorrow, past mistakes, guilt, regret, family struggles, relational issues. when I left the Mormon church and, left my whole family, my state, my mountains for the desert, snow, cool for heat. When I left all that stuff behind, it left a big hole in me that God had to fill. That I had to trust in Him. I wore this tonight, I wasn't thinking I was speaking. So I think I was going to sit down there and I'm going to freeze, and it is. And now I know how these people feel up here. My goodness gracious, feel for them. Yeah, thank you, because I feel like I'm going to pass out. But when we have these trust issues with God, our Father, the one who, our Creator, it causes us to feel like we can't be all in. And so, like I was saying, when I left Utah, I struggled for a long time because I felt like I gave up things, and I wanted to know what was God going to give me. I gave this up. In fact, the Bible says that he who will leave his mother, father, sister, brother, great blessings are going to be poured on them. And I felt like that there were things that that God didn't show up for me in the way that I supposed He would, because I did all this. So when God was talking to me about this, and I was praying and asking Him to help me then know how to be all in. What does it take? I had to come to the realization that I had to ask Him for something, and that was to reveal exactly what it was that was holding me back. Not holding you guys back, but holding me back. Because, we can point the finger and realize that these other three fingers are pointing back at us, and we can tend to say, well, this is your problem, this is your problem, this is your problem. But my problem, I have to look at what causes me to draw back from God, from what He wants for me, from what He wants me to do, from how He wants to bless me, from trusting Him. What causes me to be all in? So I had to take a hard look at areas where I tend to compromise, and I had to face my own reality. So I reflected on ways that I sometimes isolate myself. And I do. I will pull back. If I feel like I am not wanted, or I am not loved or cherished, or I feel like I'm disappointed, or that I have sinned in a certain way, I isolate myself. And who is the master of isolation? The devil. He's the master. So I can't look at God for that. And Satan got me, every time I do this, he gets me right where he wants me. If Pastor and I get in an argument, I isolate myself. Because I pull it all in on me, and it's like, you're not going to hurt me anymore. You're not going to say something that's going to, hurt me, or could step on my toes and tell me, that I need to do this and change in this way and stuff like that. But so I'll isolate. So I had to look at that and realize that it's not healthy. And I'm holding back when I do that. I had to look at the resentments in my life that sometimes pop up, because we all have them, where we resent maybe something that someone said to us, or someone, because of what they said to us. We maybe resent the way, maybe we grew up in a way that, we felt like that it wasn't fair. It wasn't, we live in a world that's full of injustice. And I can see it. And here's, Tami that wants to please everyone. And, I want to make it fair for this person, and fair for this person, and fair for this person, and gets exhausting. And, but, maybe you're one of the ones that feel like that life wasn't fair for you. I kind of feel that way, and I'll get into that a little later, about where I felt like life wasn't fair, the way that some of the things that I had to go through. And I have resented those things. Areas where I'm too rigid. Because here's Tami. Boing! Right in the middle of that box. I created the box. I put the walls up around it. It's a cube. It's got all the sides. But I'm right in the middle of it. And I am rigid. And I am stubborn. And it's not just with things like, events or I want it my way. It's things with God too. No, God, this is how it's going to be. I want it this way, and you need to do it this way. This is how I expect you to do it. Telling God how He needs to do it. Where I'm too rigid and hard-nosed, or too much of a people pleaser, which I just told you. I feel like I'm telling on myself on this. You guys are holding a magnifying glass, and it's like reflecting back to me or something. Yeah. But I had to, I had to put a magnifying glass on the things, the wounds that I had in my life. How I reflect upon past years, past issues. How the same stuff trips me up over and over again. Isn't that weird how that happens? I mean, we talk about the Israelites. They got nothing on us. We have got so many things that trip us up, and we do the circle too. The same mistakes repeated over and over. Maybe played out in a different way, but repeated over and over and over. And then I had to take a look at what I focus on. And that was the revealing part right there, because I already knew all this other stuff. I already knew all this stuff about me. I just, he had to drive the little nail in it, but I knew that part. But the difficult part was when I looked at what I focus on. So pastors often brought up about how many of us focus on things that we can't fix, right? Well, he's talking about me. So every time you hear him talking about how people that, focus on the little things, it's because we've been in a discussion or something, and he's been trying to fix me. But we focus on things that can't be done rather than on what can be done. So what can't versus can. We see the problem rather than seeing the solution. I'm a big one for that. We bought a house. It was a foreclosure in 1997, I think it's our two-story. I think it was 1997. We were living with them. And we had sold our house, and so we didn't have a house. So we bought this foreclosed home. It had pink carpet. Anybody that knows me knows what? I don't like pink. So now Pastor doesn't like beans. I don't like pink. But it had pink carpet. It was dark. It was just a few years old. It wasn't that old at all, but it just felt like a dungeon. And I don't like being closed in. It did not have a big kitchen. And even though I don't like to cook, I still like to have a big kitchen. So he saw the potential when we walked in, and all I saw was pink carpet and the hole, at the side, the big dungeon at the side, and a small kitchen. And I couldn't see it. I could not see past any of those things. He's the visionary. I mean, we talk about polar opposites. Yes, polar opposites. He's the visionary. I'm not. I have to see it to believe it. I'm the Thomas. So anyway, when God was showing me the reflection, I had to raise my hand and say, okay, God, I know, it's me. I can see what you're trying to say here. I see that tiny dot on the page rather than seeing, I focus on that little tiny dot rather than focusing on the big picture of things that God paints for me. All the brush strokes and the dabs, anybody that's into art, it's all by strokes and dabs and different things like that. And it comes together to make this beautiful picture. Well, I don't focus on that. I focus on little dots. And so I had to realize that that's what I was doing, and that was holding me back from what he's purposed for me, what he's brought me through, and what he'll do for me for the rest of my life in completing my picture. So some of the things I had to do is when I realized what I focus on, I had to then turn my focus to, well, what's causing that? So I looked at my word life. What does my word life look like? Is it, full? Is it something that, that I could be proud of? My thought life. Did I cast down thoughts? Or did I pick them up and, reflect on them and own them? My prayer life. What, is my prayer life where it needs to be? Was I spending time on my knees, or spending time with God, talking, not just talking to him, but listening to him? So I had to look at all those kind of things. And then I had to say, okay, Lord, where are my prayer life, my word life, and my thought life in comparison to my social media life, the cleaning I like to do, because I like a clean house and an organized house, searching, my adoption search, I like doing the genealogy stuff, shopping. Is there a balance? Because there shouldn't be. There should never be a balance when it comes to that versus this. That should never balance out. The words, our thought life, and our prayer life should always be the heavy side, and the others should be here. So, I had to look, did the latter overpower the former? And then I had to look at what I turned to when life turned upside down. Because remember, I'm the one that sees the dot, the problem, and bingo. I found out what it all came back to. Can anybody guess what it all comes back to? It's a thing that I struggle with all the time. 4 letters. Fear. It all came back to fear. God is always working with me with fear. I have trust issues. And I have trust issues with God because I allow fear in. Fear that I'm not good enough for him. Fear that I'm not worthy enough. Fear that I'm not clean enough, not holy enough. Fear that my past mistakes, all those past mistakes try to produce future fears in my life that I can never, I can't be a good enough pastor's wife. I can't be a good enough daughter of God. I can't be a good enough mother. There's so many things that fear came in. And it's the bottom line of what holds me back. Like I said, our mantra this year is to thrive. So how am I going to thrive if fear is the driving force in my life? It tells me that God can't bless me. It tells me that the things that I think God thinks about me, which are not true. So, like I said, this is nothing new to me. Fear is nothing new to me. It's not even an acquaintance. It's an old, heavy blanket that just, it comes on me and it stays. It's one I revisit often. It's an old friend. Fear manifests in so many different forms, and most of them we don't even see. They're subtle things that the enemy throws at us that we don't even realize that we are in fear. You listen to the way people talk, it's unbelievable. And I thought, I wonder if people are listening to the way I talk, because I bet you I say things that show that I'm in fear. Fear devastates lives. It destroys families. It cripples our potential. It causes us to miss out on amazing blessings. It paralyzes us. It grips us. It makes us sick. And the sad thing is that in the Word, and the Word of God, this thing right here, it says over and over and over and over and over, do not fear, in one way or another. It's the most repeated command through the whole Bible. And yet, it's the thing that holds most Christians back. Even pastor says he still has to work to overcome things. He doesn't want fear to overcome him, and so he'll do things to not allow fear to come in, like, jumping on suspension bridges with me on it, and that are way high, like the world's tallest suspension bridge over a ravine of water. You know, I mean, he does things like that and thinks that it's going to help me and, you know, to help him. But God leaves no room to mistake what he's talking about, that fear displeases him tremendously. He doesn't like it. So some of the things that people fear most are, can anybody guess one? Failure. Yeah, the fear of failure. Rejection. What about the fear of missing out on things? It's like, oh, I can't go to that church thing because I'm going to miss out on this. Or, you know, I mean, to me, it's like sometimes that's why, that's when I'll get like something like my social media way out of line, is that I feel like I'm going to miss out on something if I don't look, right? And yet it's the same thing over and over and over and over. And it's like, why am I doing this? So fear of missing out, fear of health, the loss of health. I mean, I'll tell you, I struggle in that area. I have to cast down thoughts about you're going to die early, you know, because my dad died at 61, my mom died at 78, my biological father died at 38 of the very same thing that Marissa was healed of, a congenital heart defect. And Marissa was healed when she was 18 months old with the same thing. It's a hereditary defect. And but you know, I mean, fear of losing my children, you know, fear that they're not going to find the loves of their life, those kind of things. Fear that I'll never have grandchildren, you know, that I love kids, and you know, fear that all those kind of things try to come on me. There's another one is fear of not having enough, like, you know, not having enough food, not having enough wealth, prosperity, fear of the loss of relationships. That's what I felt, you know, whenever I left Utah, is that I was going to lose out on all these things, but yet I gained God. Why would I even, you know, I was young in the Lord, so I didn't see that. Fear that we're not enough. Fear that we're going to hell because we keep sinning. I mean, you know, God says that His mercies are new every morning. If we're sincere and we repent, His mercies are new every morning. But the devil will come and tell you, you know, he's the accuser of the brethren. He'll tell you what you did 10 years ago, you know, that, oh, you naughty, naughty girl, you know. He'll tell you things like that. He'll tell you that you're going to hell. You're going to be right here with me, girl. The fear that God can't love us because of our past and our present. The fear that we'll never change from things. The fear that we can't witness to anyone. I don't think I've told you guys, but when we were in Utah in May, my sister, Marcy, the one that's 5 years younger than me, who has struggled with an addiction in her life for many, many years, she, for the lack of a better word, she was very, very sick, and she ended up in the hospital. And the Lord, you know, kept saying to me, witness to her because we went back there before we went to our niece's wedding in Colorado. And so we went to see my family, but we went specifically so that we could see Marcy and pray over her if she would let us. Well, we went, and the conversation didn't, just long story short, the conversation did not quite feel like it was getting to that at all. And inside of me, I kept thinking, oh, it's not going to get there. And I'm going to lose this opportunity. And I mean, you know, all the negative stuff coming in my mind, you know, playing that record, it kept going around and around and around, the same thing. And it got closer and closer. She did say that we could pray for her. And, you know, we had to leave because we were going to dinner with the rest of my family, and we had to drive. So I thought, well, we're going to miss this. The opportunity's not going to be there. And then all of a sudden, I thought, no, I have prayed for this. This is something that I've asked God for. I've asked God for the salvation of my sister. And let me tell you, if there's anybody that needed it, she needed it, because she has been the antagonist of the family forever. And, just a really, all of us, there's 5 siblings, and all of us struggle with a relationship with her because of how she is. So all of a sudden, this unction came over me. And I witnessed to her, and I got her saved. And she received Jesus. Now, she's got a long way to go. She's not going to church anywhere. She's afraid of not going to the Mormon church. She lives in Utah, right in the heart of it all. And she's afraid that, our siblings will cut her off because they basically take care of her if she tells them. And so what's happening is the old ugly spirit is trying to rise up in her. And it tried, that's when I said, that when I referenced Ralph's letter that he read at the beginning, and said, that a storm is coming. And then I said, Dr. Barkley had said that, people come against Christians. Well, that's what happened. But at first I was really, it was like a demon that came out. And it was I was a little taken back by it. But as I was praying last night, it's just like a peace came over me that just pray over her spirit. Just pray over her spirit. So you guys help me. Pray over her spirit, that it calms down, that she finds the peace of God, and that she, that this does not, that the word is not stolen from her. It doesn't come back void. But anyway, that's kind of a little side story there, a rabbit trail. But, if you didn't know me before, you wouldn't really know that I battle the spirit of fear, except for that PD tells on me. But if we were having a random conversation, you really wouldn't see it, because I come across having confidence. You wouldn't know that my life has been infected by a spirit of fear, because I can come out put together. But it's real, and it has been a struggle in my life. Besides the typical things like cockroaches and spiders and sharks and snakes and, all those little squiggly things. There's more like deep water and heights and stuff like that. And then, like I said, pastor jumping up and down on the world's highest suspension bridge over a deep ravine of water, jumping out from behind a wall. He tries to fix me like this, but he does things that scare me. Karina, she sent she's not even in here. She sent a video to Tiffany and Marissa about where you're holding it, and they said, Karina sent this thing, watch it. And so I'm looking at this, and we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, something goes, wah, like that, and I lost it. I was shaking for hours, maybe not hours, but it was a long time. But I have, besides the normal stuff, I have many other fears that you wouldn't know that grip and paralyze me. It's wrapped its tentacles around me. Speaking of octopus, it's influenced many thoughts and decisions that I've made, and it's caused me to miss opportunities that I should have taken. It's caused me to literally run and retreat. It's caused me to be paralyzed to the point of not being able to move and almost breathe. It's caused me to doubt myself and others. It's left me emotional as well as emotionless, and it's distorted my vision and calling in God's kingdom. And sadly, even an image or a thought reminding me of these things can provoke that feeling inside of me. It's a spirit of fear. So I grew up being afraid. And what does the Bible say about being afraid? Go to 2 Timothy. Turn to 2 Timothy 1:7. Say it. You guys know it. For God has not given us spirit of fear, power, love, and a sound mind. We know this, right? But I grew up being afraid. I didn't know these things. I had parents who voiced fear all the time. My dad, he wasn't a sissy by any means, but he was afraid of things. And a lot of it stemmed from losing his mother when he was 5 years old. But God showed me this spirit began in my early childhood years. I'd go to slumber parties, and I'd call my parents and tell them to come and get me, even though it was just like 3 houses down, because of something, a shadow I saw on the wall or something like that. You know, I thought, I've told you guys once before that I thought I was going to die because my Uncle Ike, my mom's uncle, who smoked and drank and, you know, lived an unholy life. I mean, I loved him dearly, but, you know, he did not live a healthy life. He died. And the words to me about why he died was that his heart just stopped. And so 8 years old, I started sleeping with my hand over my heart so that if it stopped, I could yell out, "Hey, my heart stopped. Come and," you know, and because what they said is they couldn't get to him in time. So, "Hey, my heart stopped. Come and start it up again," you know. So I'm 8 years old, and I'm, you know, this is real fear to me. I slept with my hand for over a year, lost all this weight. I was 8 years old. And why doesn't that happen now with all the fear? But anyway, you know, fear was real. And, you know, I always thought I was going to get kidnapped or raped or murdered or something like that. You know, my purse stolen, all that kind of stuff. In college, I experienced things no one should have ever experienced with occult type things. And a lot of it stemmed from, you know, I participated in Halloween. I went to haunted houses, saw scary movies, the scariest of scary movies, demonic things that you could believe. I played with Ouija boards and things like that. I went to cemeteries and did that kind of stuff too. You know, we sat and told scary stories around fires. All of that implanted into this little girl, you know, as I was growing up. So it's not a shock that I dealt with vivid, real experiences with demons and demonic encounters. Because me and all my friends opened the door wide for them to come in. We rolled out the red carpet. "Hey, come on in," you know, for them to take their place. I entertained things that weren't of God. And those things took precedence in my life, took over my thoughts and imaginations, and I received a spirit of fear. See, it's always a cause and effect. What happened, you know, what you're doing is going to produce something. So there are two doorways that we can walk through. One is fear, and the other one is the opposite. What is that? Faith. So go to Hebrews 10:38. Hebrews 10:38. So God's going to tell us something here of what we need to do, of how he expects his righteous people to be. And it says, "But my righteous one, the one justified by faith," I'm reading from the Amplified here, "shall live by faith, respecting man's relationship to God and trusting him." And here's so that's the cause. Here's the effect. Or am I doing it opposite? Okay, "And if he draws back, he shrinks back in fear, my soul has no delight in him," no pleasure. So God tells us that we're to live by faith, we're not to draw back in fear, and if we do, then he has no delight in us. Meaning, you know, it's not like we're going, well, I don't know if we're going to hell or not, but, because he says, the fearful and the unafraid, right, will have their place in hell. But if we do, he has no delight in us. We disappoint him. Do we want to disappoint God? So faith, which is the opposite of fear, is a spiritual force just the same as faith is. It's a spiritual force that will move things and change things. It can change your body. How many have ever believed for something in your body and saw it work? Amen. I did. I did 2022, and I got my miracle. It can change the mind, it can change the heart, and it can change circumstances around us. It's not a product of the mind, and it's not a product of reason. Logic has no place in it whatsoever. It's a product of our spirit, our hearts, the heart of God. If we go back to 2 Timothy 1:7, and it says that God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, we know that faith is of God, because it says that he gives us power, love, and a sound mind. Faith is a power. It's a force. So we know fear's not from God. Faith is from God. But do you know that fear also is the only real weapon that the enemy can use against believers? If he can get you to be afraid of something or fear something, then he can control you. So both of them, opposite ends, are spiritual forces that are tangible. And where fear is a demonic force and a demonic presence that shouldn't be welcomed, faith is a godly force and a presence of God that should be welcomed. So just as the force of faith goes to bring about the good things that God's promised, when we activate fear in our lives, then it goes to work to bring about the bad things, the things that you're afraid of. Case in point, Job. Remember the story of Job? Okay, for the first 33 books of Job, what do you see? All the things that went wrong for Job, right? First 33 books of it, the chapters of it. It reveals all the terrible things that happened to him. Every single thing that was terrible. He had stolen livestock. He had those boils that came up on his body. There were devastations in the weather. He had his wife that was unsupportive and doubted him. It caused his friends to speak out about him. He lost his family. He lost his home. Health issues. All those kind of things. But did his misery come from God? It's a story that has confused believers because of the way it's told. But if we just look in the Bible, we can see exactly what the scripture says about it. That the things that we've often been taught about it's caused us to think that God brings calamity. God brings all this stuff. But it's not. It's not that. Because if you look in Job 3:25, it says, "For the very thing which I greatly feared has come upon me, and that which I was afraid of is come unto me." Job tells us exactly what happened. He feared all these things. All these things he feared. And guess what happened? He pulled them all in. They all became, they became real. So his misery came from the devil, not from God. He opened the door of opportunity for Satan to enter in, to kill, steal, and destroy. And every evil came through that spirit, the spirit of fear. So Pastor Dave was teaching on Sunday about King Asa and about his downfall. And, Asa, despite his faithfulness, he had a history of faithfulness, but he chose to seek help from a worldly influence, a human power, rather than fully relying on God's power when he was threatened, which was a lack of faith, which comes from fear. So essentially, he prioritized human alliances over faith in God's protection. And then the final year of Asa's reign are played out in a very sad way, where he turns on the people and he oppresses them. There are wars for the duration of his life, and he's in a sickbed with a debilitating disease that was so severe and yet even in that, he didn't seek the Lord. He sought physicians. Worldly physicians. He remains stiff-necked and rebellious. And we shake our heads at the Israelites. We shake our heads at Job. We shake our heads at Asa. You guys missed it. But yet we have the same stories. We have the exact same stories. And I'm going to tell a little story on me that maybe some of you know, some of you don't know. But I was born with a defective bladder. And it was very difficult for my parents to potty train me. I had infections when I was just a baby. And, UTIs are not fun things. And so they couldn't figure out, what was wrong. I went to doctor after doctor, and finally they took me to Children's Hospital, the primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake City. And when Dr. Fisher, who was the urologist, the pediatric urologist there, did exploratory surgery. And he found out that the urethra, which is where the urine goes through from the kidneys, it filters down into the urethra and out, right? That's how we eliminate. My urethra was shorter than what most urethras are, like significantly shorter. And it could not be fixed medically. And it also was tilted. So instead of the urine going out, some of it, I didn't release all of it. It stayed in there, which caused it to fester into infection. And so I went through a series of surgeries. Well, after that, this exploratory surgery, they found out what was wrong. I had another surgery to try to fix it. And that surgery was botched. And ever since then, every surgery that I've had has been to try to fix that surgery. Now, those things were not under my control, right? I was a child. I was an infant. My parents didn't know either, and they weren't, they didn't have the faith to believe in stuff like that. But when I became a Christian, all these things, this became alive to me. This was truth. And truth is that by the stripes of Jesus, I was healed and made whole by my faith, right? And he took those stripes for me. And then Psalm 139 says that he knit me together in my mother's womb. And God doesn't make junk, right? Does he make junk? No. Now, we live in natural bodies, and sometimes things can go wrong. I told you Marissa was born with a congenital heart defect and healed at 18 months completely. But when I became a Christian, this should have become the source, how I based everything from then on about my bladder. It should have been based on this. And it was for a long time. And I did not have UTIs frequently, but the doctor kept saying, that actually the gynecologist would say to me, well, when you have children, you're probably going to end up having to have the surgery again, the Marshall-Molschetti procedure, and where they go and they tack the bladder up and do that kind of stuff. And so, the word of the physician kept coming to me that this is what's going to happen. And sure enough, guess what? I lost control after I had children. And so every time I go to the doctor, the gynecologist, for my yearly, how's you doing? Well, pretty soon I was wearing pads to catch the leaks, and it was becoming uncomfortable. It wasn't it wasn't terrible. It was just, just like a nuisance. Well, he kept saying, you ought to go. There's a good urologist at the clinic, and you should have this bladder sling done. That's what most ladies have done, when they're in menopause, but, you should have it done. So I kept thinking about it. I thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to have it done because I don't like wearing these, and I don't like having this, feeling like I'm out of control. So Tami went to see the urologist, set up a schedule for surgery in 2003, and ever since 2003, it has been worse than ever. Can we say King Asa? And so, it's basically, I need a miracle. I need God to give me new parts and change things. I've been to several different urologists since then, and that's what they say is that you're unique. Thanks. I always knew that, but but because Tami took things upon herself and didn't want to be burdened down with anything and wasn't patient enough to wait for God and consult this, Tami has paid for it ever since. Like Job, like the Israelites, like King Asa, you pay for when you get impatient and you allow fear to come in. And that's what it was. Impatience is fear. All these things are fear. So anyway, since then, can I believe for a miracle? Absolutely. But since then, there's been other things that I have to believe for, and other things that I have to believe for, and other things I have to believe for. And yes, I did have, the lump that God supernaturally healed me of, and that's my altar in the wilderness. That's what I set up, is that, God, you did it then, and God, you'll do it again. And so my words, I cannot allow that fear in me, but that fear tends to want to raise its ugly head and say, this will never change. This is always going to be the same. You're never going to be healed of this. It's always going to be a nuisance. It's always going to be something you have to deal with. But never once has God failed, and never will he ever fail. Amen. So if we can trust him, and we can believe him, and we can have faith in him, then nothing's going to hold us back. Nothing at all will ever hold us back. If we believe God's word, then it's going to be impossible for fear to enter into our minds and our hearts. If the force of fear can imprison a person, then the force of faith can make that person free. And if fear will make a person sick, then faith can make a person well. It's not hard to see. It's not rocket science, but we try to make it into rocket science. Under this law, there's no disaster, no calamity, and no storm. Storms rage all around, but it doesn't affect us. But under the law of fear, sin and death are activated. So the choice is ours. Will we continue to allow fear to hold us back from thriving, or will we allow faith to help us thrive in 25 and continue after, even when the storm is raging all around?